is located on a glacial ridge about 2 kilometres south of the town of Elphin, which was an important ecclesiastical settlement in the early medieval period. The site consists of an early medieval enclosure with an annex to the western side. Site director Brian O'Hara tells us the story of Killeen East too.
Early medieval enclosures are commonly called ring forts or fairy forts. There's about 48,500 recorded by the Archaeological Survey of Ireland. I suppose archaeologists don't really like the term ring fort anymore, so we refer to them as early medieval enclosures. In Irish they're known as a rath, a dún, a caher, a cashel or liss. These different names refer to the different methods of construction used, so anywhere with one of those place names usually has a ring fort nearby. So the early medieval period dates from approximately 400 AD to 1169 AD. It begins really with the introduction of Christianity into Ireland and ends with the Norman invasion in 1169. What marks the early medieval period from the preceding Iron Age is obviously the introduction of Christianity, but we also see much more evidence for settlement in the early medieval period. We have very few Iron Age settlement sites in Ireland.
So what was an early medieval enclosure, such as the one excavated at Killeen East too?
They're a type of fortified farmstead, usually occupied by a single family group. In the early medieval period, we didn't have towns or cities in Ireland really. What we have are clusters of enclosures beside each other. So these clusters of early medieval enclosures were generally occupied by a family group or a kin group. The site of Killeen East is extremely large. We excavated the northern portion of the enclosure. So the area that we excavated measured about 45 metres east-west and 30 metres north-south. So it was quite large compared to other ring forts that have been excavated. I suppose one of the more unusual aspects about it is that the enclosure itself wasn't circular. It was more curvilinear or oval in shape, the excavated portion, and that seems to be due to the need for water management on the site. The soil on top of the ridge here at Killeen East is quite impermeable to water, so water management was a major issue for ourselves, and I'm sure it was a major issue for the people who constructed the enclosure.
What kind of person would have constructed an enclosure such as the one at Killeen East?
In order to dig a ditch around an early medieval enclosure, a lot of resources had to be deployed, so you're taking people away from the other kind of work they would have to carry out, farming and so forth. But the fact that there was an annex for livestock attached to the western side, that necessitated more ditch digging, which is more expense to the occupier. And the presence of 4 souterrain chambers indicates that the people who inhabited this site had a reasonably high level of disposable resources. So the main enclosure itself was a habitation, and the annex appears to have been as a corral for livestock, so cattle were brought in from the fields and kept in the annex for safekeeping. I suppose we're close to Rathcrohan here, so I'm sure everyone will be familiar with Anton Boculia. The presumed reason for, not just for this annex, but for a large number of early medieval enclosures having strong defensive elements, is the prevalence of raiding, and in particular raiding for cattle in the early medieval period. Within the enclosure and the annex itself, we found a total of 4 souterrain chambers. Souterrains are a man-made underground chamber which were used as a refuge or as a place to store food. Effectively, they act as a cold store for food, usually butter and cheese. The souterrains that were uncovered on site are generally, they're typical of the type found in the west of Ireland. They consist of a single chamber. They are measured between 4 and 5 metres in length and about 2.5 metres in width. Depth would be about 1.6 metres for 3 of them, and then souterrain number 2, which was located in very close proximity to the presumed location of where the bank would be to the interior of the enclosure, was extremely shallow. It was 0.8 metres in depth, so just under 3 feet. In souterrain 3A, we recovered a prehistoric polished stone axe, and this object was clearly positioned in the wall. And it would seem that the people who constructed the souterrain had found this object and incorporated it into the wall of the souterrain itself. And it's possible that it was incorporated as a good luck charm or something along those lines. 2 of the 4 chambers had drains running from the low-lying end of the souterrain just to carry water away from them. The drain running from souterrain 1 ran into the enclosure ditch itself. Souterrain 3B had a stone-lined box drain. It was clearly part of the overall design of the souterrain itself. In the stone lining for Souterrain 3B, a gap was deliberately left, and the box drain to carry the water away lined up with this perfectly. And just in front of that gap in the stone lining, there was a very large flat slab had been incorporated into the wall itself. We may be able to speculate that this was used as a shelf or something like that for storing food. It's probably worth noting as well that the two drains that we have are midway up the walls of the souterrains themselves, so they would have left standing water within these features. In Souterrain 3B, we had clear evidence that this was being used as a defensive structure. We had a wall, or stone lining, which had been modified to include a bolt hole, and at the base of this we had a spud stone, so that's the stone on which a door would pivot. This door would have pivoted inwards rather than outwards, and the bolt hole was positioned in such a way that a bar could be put across the door to block entry. In addition, the way that the door pivoted inwards would have made it nearly impossible for anyone coming in with any kind of hostile intent to access the souterrain further if there was people inside. In total, we recovered 4 burials on site, 3 of which consisted of the burials of children, and they were found in the souterrains. So in Souterrain 1, we had 2 burials, but these were recovered from the upper fills. The burials here were orientated east to west, and buried in the kind of standard Christian manner. In Souterrain 3B, at the doorway I just previously mentioned, we found the remains of an individual, a boy of about 12 years of age or so. And this individual either fell into the souterrain and died there, or was dumped at this location. It's not quite clear yet until we have full post-excavation archaeological analysis to determine, if possible, how he died. A 4th burial was uncovered at the site, which was the remains of a woman of about 50 years of age or thereabouts. Quite a small framed individual, and she was buried again in the kind of standard position one would expect of a Christian burial, but was orientated north-south rather than east-west.
Among the finds at Killeen East too was a quernstone found in Souterrain 3B. It is not yet clear if it dates to the early medieval period. Specialist analysis will verify its date, and if the quernstone is of a later date, it would indicate that the souterrain was still open in the later medieval or perhaps even the post-medieval period. Other finds included a fragmented bone comb. Also found were copper alloy dress pins of about 12 to 15 centimetres in length, which were contemporaneous with the excavated features. There were a number of whittle and tang knives found. These consist of a blade with a tang where a wooden or bone handle would have been attached.
I suppose other than the early medieval period, we do have evidence for Bronze Age activity in the vicinity of Killeen East, which included burnt spreads at Killeen East 3 and 4 and a ring barrow at Killeen East 1. So burnt spreads are probably the most commonly excavated archaeological monument we have in Ireland. Generally found in wet areas, they consist of a pit which is excavated below the water table, so the pit will naturally fill up with water. And nearby sandstone would be heated in a fire. Once the sandstone was sufficiently warm, this would be put into the pit containing water, and it could bring the water to the boil quite quickly.
A further feature excavated at Killeen East too was a large rectilinear of uncertain date, possibly Norman, but possibly also much earlier, maybe even prehistoric. Like the finds, the inhumations and the more identifiable features excavated at Killeen East, work to interpret the provenance of the rectilinear feature will continue during post-excavation analysis, long after the physical excavation of the site has been completed.